out of all the topics I want to discuss, out of all the goals in my life that I am in pursuit of, the very central theme is the spiritual path. Because your ability to even be happy with achieving your dreams and goals is dependent on your spiritual state. If you're not spiritually developed, you might be happy with your life, but still be a very selfish, ego-driven person, and all that repressed darkness that you hide within ends up coming out and can be very destructive. And I've experienced that myself. And I cooperated when I sort of began this spiritual journey. I would say it was in 2014, about when I discovered Eastern philosophy and religion. And at that point, I had lost my faith in Christianity for a few years. And so when I rediscovered, spirituality, it was of the Eastern variety. It's not limited to the East. There are Westerners who actually discover the same principles, but just within a different tradition and context. And in that case, I would say that the unifying theme is mysticism. Mysticism is simply mystery. It means you're not looking at systematic theology books that explain to you the nature of the Trinity and nature of salvation and all that, and nature of the cosmos and all that. It is about the need to directly experience God, or the spiritual realm, if you don't like the term God, the Tao, the oneness of all things. And that has to be experienced to actually know it. The Tao Te Ching says, the Tao that can be named is not the true Tao. Of course, there's a paradox there, because by referencing the true Tao, you are calling it something. I would say the way to deal with that is to recognize that the point of a phrase like that is not to define the Tao, but to point in the direction. I think it was Buddha that, the Buddha or Buddha. I just, sounds weird either way, because the Buddha sounds pretentious. I'm okay with calling it Buddha, because it's a title. Christ is a title, but we don't necessarily usually say the Christ, even though that's accurate too. So anyway, you can use language, traditions, and practices that channel you in the right direction. But ultimately, it's true spirituality is about the direct experience of God or consciousness, unity. I use the term God. I used to be really uncomfortable with it. But one of the interesting angles about that approach is that it's not so much that you are, it's more about, the focus is more about what it's not. So spirituality is not theological doctrines. Spirituality is not different concepts that we may have come up with to explain spirituality. And it isn't this, it isn't this, it isn't this. And so once you realize it's none of those things, then you stop trying to identify it as them. And then there's more of a chance, once you've eliminated like the 500 different unconscious assumptions about what, who, or where God is, then you sort of drop all these barriers that keep you from direct experience. I believe that if there is a religion or belief system that gets closest to reality, it is Buddhism. I think there is overlap, not complete contradiction, between Buddhism and Christianity. And I think Zen is the most pure form of that. That does not mean that it's superior to any other traditions. It just means that it does away with a lot of the trappings that people use to help them on that path. And those are valuable. Some people need them. But Zen gets closest to the heart of the nature of spirituality, in my opinion, because it is focused on direct experience. You don't meditate on gurus or Buddhas or chants. I mean, you look at a candle, you look at a rock, you look at your one hand, meditate on hands clapping, all that. But the interesting thing about Buddhism is I used to call myself a Buddhist, and I came to read, after many years of just kind of rejecting the Bible, or it's truth, the truth of the gospel as Christians teach it. I read John 3, and I read Story of the Prodigal Son, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is profound. This is something to live by my life by. And because I'm surrounded by Christians, like almost all my friends and family, with some exceptions, are Christian, and I realized that, in discussions about why I said Buddhism is more true than Christianity, at least as they understand it, I wasn't really building bridges. And so I was kind of excited about the idea that I'd rediscovered Christianity, but I'd kind of eliminated the baggage that people assume is fundamental to the concept of being a Christian. But about a month ago, I got into a debate, and I was trying to argue for Christian beliefs, but I was explaining why I don't believe in the Bible is infallible. And basically, I revealed myself to be a heretic of the sort that 10 years ago, if I'd heard somebody saying those same things, I would say, you're not even saved. You don't know Jesus because your concept of Jesus is wrong. It's not true. It's not the real Jesus, and you're missing the most fundamental principles. And so since then, I still find a lot of value in Christian ideas and conversations. But I've realized that even though I do find Jesus to be an inspiration, and his message of forgiveness and sacrifice, as I understand it, not the standard theology, Buddhism is, I'm 90% Buddhist and 10% Christian. I mean, fundamentally, Buddhism informs my life far more, and Christianity and stuff is something that I can incorporate into it. I mean, I think that Jesus could have been considered a bodhisattva. There is room within Buddhism for Jesus and the gospel. not the mistaken version that has become called Christianity. Whereas to call yourself a Christian, most Christians would say there really isn't a lot of room for Buddhism. What's interesting though is that when I discovered Buddhism, I was like 22, 21 or something like that. And I started meditating because I had, heard that meditation is just really good for you. And for many years before I kind of dropped the identity as a Christian, I was comfortable incorporating Buddhist principles and meditation because I saw it more as a philosophy than a religion. It doesn't say whether or not Jesus was the Son of God and died for your sins. It just says, here's the nature of your mind, here's the nature of reality, all that. And in Zen, a lot of Zen people don't, well, they don't even address the issue of whether God exists or not. They think it's a distraction. So that's why Zen is very influential in our society, because it's very philosophical. It's not really quite a religion, and my argument for why Christians shouldn't be threatened by the idea that you can find some very profound ideas within some Buddhist idea teachings and doctrine as set forth. I would say Christian theology is interwoven inextricably with the concepts of the pagan Greek philosophers. They didn't believe in Jesus. I don't know exactly what their concept of God was, but they would debate whether God or the gods existed at all. But they were able to use a very logical system of inquiry, where you try to use the best logic you can to discover truth. And because that works so well, the early church, like Constantine and stuff like that, they use that system of logic to argue for why God exists or the nature of man, all that sort of stuff. And Buddhism also gets into logical inquiry, but there's a lot more to do. It's more of a very personal, experiential sort of spirituality. Whereas Greek philosophy, it's if A plus B is C, then C plus D equals A, whatever. If that makes sense. It probably doesn't. So anyway, all that to say, what I sat down here to talk about is that I want to basically, I've got a list of topics where I want to go through point by point. This is what enlightenment is, what it's not. This is these are practices that work. This is the nature of duality and non-duality. I want to talk about common misconceptions that most people have, and I certainly did for many years, and sort of explain it in a way that I don't just have to say, oh well, it's a paradox, you just have to just accept it because I'm so wise and I can talk in these vague, profound sounding concepts that don't actually make sense like some spiritual teachers do. It's because if it's a mystical belief system or framework or premise, it's very easy for pretenders to just repeat mystical sounding things without any real understanding of them, which is one of the definitions that I would use, the primary definition, what New Ageism is. it is the adoption of Eastern spiritual concepts and phrases without any real grasp of how they actually work, but it makes you sound spiritual. And then, of course, they add in really ridiculous stuff like astrology and crystal healing and stuff like that. Um, so anyway, to wrap this up, um, I rediscovered Eckhart Tolle recently, and once I realized, I didn't agree with him on stuff. I thought maybe he's not as profound as, people think he is, or even I thought he was at one point. But once I saw some of the red flags, it made me stop sort of about his teachings, his life, his attitude, his beliefs. Sometimes once like you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like sometimes you might see a red flag that is an error in somebody's thinking, but they might be, have a lot of validity in other areas. You don't want to just say, you know, judge people for being imperfect or wrong on some counts. But there are some types of red flags that one would, to avoid throwing the baby out with the bathwater, I would sort of give him credit for some of his teachings that I no longer do, because I thought that, he his teachings involve, like the experience of spirituality, and if it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, or I'm not sure if it's vague, well, there's a lot of spiritual teachings that I've heard before, and I didn't understand until I actually experienced them. So how can you tell? Well, these red flags kind of made me realize, oh, I see that same attitude, that same just garbage philosophy that permeates his entire message. Not to say he doesn't have truth in his ideas, but I would say you can find those ideas elsewhere, and elsewhere you can find that they actually build up to something that is profound. So anyway, yeah, last video I talked about, my intention to really get into Eckhart Tolle and sort of deconstruct him. And one of the reasons I felt like kind of passionate about that is that it's kind of exciting to see past bullshit that you didn't realize was complete bullshit, and you see other people believing in it. And so I'm all about ideas. I'm about deconstructing ideas. I really love to I love truth. I'm a thinker. I want to know the truth. And seeing the trap of toxic, dysfunctional, or just flat out wrong ideas based on wrong logic and evidence, seeing past it when I didn't see it past it before, it's exciting because, aha, now I'm not being fooled. And I think it's good to be able to share that with people. Not everybody's called to that. Like, you don't want to be a dick that's always correcting everybody. But I still enjoy and think it's important that I cultivate the ability to deconstruct bad ideas, and also let some pass. If somebody says something that's stupid and it's not a big deal, just let it go. I know when to shut my mouth, more so than maybe I used to. So anyway, the point of all this to say, this is I went into just a lot of different aspects of spirituality. So, hopefully, even if I wasn't very systematic here, this is still sort of me explaining just sort of how I look at spirituality and what it means to me. And anyway, I sometimes, when I realize that an idea is complete BS and it's toxic and it's just wrong and everybody believes it, and I feel like I'm the only person that has seen through it, it makes me angry and frustrated. Like I want to explain it to people, and it's like, how can you believe something so ridiculous? And so I get really fired up, and then I have to stop myself, because I'll notice that I'm just getting more and more angry. A lot of that has to do with the political climate today. And I've realized that instead of just being a debunker and saying, here's why this idea is wrong, I want to be able to use that as a springboard to compare truth to. And so using an example of somebody getting it all wrong kind of implies that I can compare and contrast that idea to the way it really works. And so when you see contrasts, it makes it a lot more clear. So like I was saying, spirituality, God, Tao, all that, it's most important to eliminate what it's not. And that's what I want to do with Eckhart Tolle. And one aspect that I think really stands out that fools people, and kind of fooled me, is that there is this conception that because enlightenment means that you've transcended, samsara, this world, and now you are full of light and wisdom, you just kind of sit up on a cloud and you dispense with wisdom, and you never react or get emotional. You're just off in the ether. And Eckhart Tolle is really all about that, and it's phony. It's bullshit. Enlightened people he does not act like actually enlightened people act. And I know this from, just a lot of teachers who I've talked about the concept. Your personality doesn't just shut off. And the type of enlightenment, he kind of puts on display, is not something that I want. It's like, yeah, it'd be nice to just be at peace all the time, but do I want to just stop having a personality? I mean, maybe once I got there, I wouldn't care and be like, okay, cool. Not having a personality is great, because I am one with everything, and I don't have any preferences, or nothing bothers me. That is so different than the human experience, that whether or not it actually is blissful compared to the human experience, to me, the spiritual journey is the human experience. And it's not about just becoming this super being deity or whatever. So yeah. So I feel good about that. It's kind of encouraging that I can combine my debunking mentality with the anger that I end up like fueling because I'm angry at people that mislead people and lead people into suffering and delusion. And so instead of ranting about here's why he's wrong, talk about the pitfalls and errors in thinking and practice and interpretation of his own spiritual experiences that ensnare people all the time. And I've gotten stuck in them. Like I've kept on going and I've seen past them, but you know, the spiritual journey is yeah, so I'll have to wrap this up, but one of the main gists of it, I would say, is enlightenment involves seeing past the illusion of dualism. And that's why you talk about enlightenment as being one with everything. You start to realize it's not me and the world or me and you or this thing and that thing. It's all part of this one unified whole. And I was about to say it means transcending dualism. But no, it is not about transcending dualism. There might be types of enlightenment that do involve that. But there's a very big difference between transcending dualism and seeing past dualism. Transcending it essentially means you have just went off into the ether and you no longer live in the world of form. If you live in the world of form, you cannot transcend dualism. You can transcend your old misperceptions of dualism, but you still have to live in the dualistic world. But it does mean that whereas before your whole view of the world was dualistic, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's not all dualistic, it is all one, and the dualistic perception of the world is an illusion. It people get the idea that that means that so yes, becoming enlightened does involve letting go of your dualistic perceptions of the world. But if you come to that place and you have that initial awakening, which Eckhart Tolle did, I believe that, you know, his story about how he had an awakening experience, I think he did sincerely have, you know, experienced something profound, contained truth. But he stopped there. And he said, oh, well, this is it. I'm enlightened. And because of that, if you decide, well, I'm enlightened now, not many people become enlightened. Okay, it's just not part of the story of most people's lives. I have had enlightenment experiences, so I do actually understand how it works and what it's like. But I'm back to this old world of form. I would still be in the world of form, but I've lost touch with that oneness. And I'm okay with that. I'm just glad that I've had the experience of Satori and Nirvana that has enabled me to see what I'm working towards and to know that I don't truly have it yet. So yeah, having experiences of transcendent reality of experiencing ego death, which my experiences with and knowledge of is more with psychedelics. Um, Man, you can have a very profound psychedelic experience and experience legit ego death, but you got to re-enter the world, and it is people having an ego death experience on psychedelics does not mean your ego stays dead. It comes back, and it can come back a lot stronger because now you're like, well, I've transcended my ego. I don't have an ego anymore. And I am enlightened, and I am wise and powerful, and I can see the truth that other people can't. You become a megalomaniac. Um, is Eckhart Tolle, when he snickers to himself while he's talking, I do wonder if he has either, and I ask this a lot about megachurch pastors, because I think there's this whole spectrum. They're true believers that truly believe that they are teaching something good, even if they're not really necessarily living like the way Jesus would want them to. Like Joel Osteen, he's a sincere believer. Kenneth Copeland, Creflo Dollar, I think that they know they're bullshitting people and that they're lying, and they probably snicker to themselves and laugh like, haha, we got these poor suckers. It's just a guess. I don't know if those specific ones are that far, but there are preachers that are on that side. And then, and then there's somewhere in the middle where you do unethical things or you act greedy, but you rationalize it by saying, well, but I'm also doing good things, tell people. I think Eckhart Tolle is probably closer to being a true believer. And because he's not enlightened, he doesn't have the ability to recognize like the contradictions of how he lives his life, the way he runs his businesses, the way he deals with his money, the arrogance of claiming to be enlightened. I think he actually believes that he is. And unconsciously, I think he's probably adopted a personality and mannerisms that are befitting of one who's enlightened. And I don't think he necessarily thought to himself, I'm going to try to make sure that like, if I actually display a personality or too much, I got to be really limited. And if I, he does, I think, put on a personality and way he words things in a way that he probably believes is sincere, but I think subconsciously it's a guess. Okay, I don't know. I'm just speculating. It's like I've heard. Okay, let's talk about psychedelics. Okay, so I've heard it said that, well, the reason the government made psychedelics illegal is because they realized that psychedelics open people's minds, and if people's minds get opened up, they'll realize that the government is just a bunch of bullshit, and they will like resist and rebel, and so they're trying to stop people from opening up their minds. Well, the problem with that is that anybody that actually understands like how that works would have to be somebody who has had their minds opened. And if your President Nixon had the capacity to understand that opening people's minds up was the threat to the government and power structures, he wouldn't have tried to suppress it. His mind would be open. I think that unconsciously I think what they recognize is not that people's minds are opened and they have spiritual experiences that bring their, vibrational frequency up. I think that they just see the chaos and independence and rebellion. They don't actually have a grasp that it involves something, oftentimes deeply profound, even though that opening of the mind is what causes rebellion and chaos. So I would say that I don't think Eckhart Tolle thinks he's gypping people. He because I don't think that he is wise and enlightened, and so this is a conundrum. If you are enlightened, and you can be quite sure, because when it actually happens, you can be like, yeah, this is the real deal. But the same can be said of people that don't actually grasp it. But how do you know? Well, we'll get into that later, and I'll just wrap it up here. So the next topic that I'm going to start with is I'm going to sort of go through, I'm going to make a video about Eckhart's story in his life. And then I'll make one about his teachings. I'm going to talk about what enlightenment is and isn't, and use Eckhart as an example of what it's not. I'm going to address spiritual bypassing, what it is. This is a really important one. This ego, okay? What is the nature of ego? And why, if you think you've killed your ego, I can't say that's not how it works. I mean, ego dies and you cooperate, but if you think that you've killed your ego, you probably have a stronger ego than ever. So yeah, the pitfall of taking that first step of awakening and thinking that you've arrived. And so the harm that is done is it's subtle. It doesn't actually bring people into a bad place so much as it prevents continued growth. It enhances ego, and it causes people to. Eckhart definitely cultivates a cult-like following. I would not say he actually runs a true cult, but I see the same psychological characteristics there that are very present in cults. And I think that when you put a man like that up on a pedestal, like, people think he is like the most enlightened master, there is, then you just kind of accept ideas that you don't actually understand, that he doesn't understand. and you start spouting off pithy platitudes, um, and so spiritual bypassing, and finally, one of the most profound, I forgot about this until just now because this is more about Jung than Eastern philosophy, the shadow. Integration of the shadow has been in my life, and I think in most people's lives, one of, if not the most fundamental, crucial psycho-spiritual stage that is very difficult and takes a long time, but you cannot grow spiritually if you do not address the shadow. And I want to talk about how to address the shadow, how to handle it, how to interact with it, how to let it go, how it behaves. And if you simply adopt a guru's teachings, because they sound very profound, you may think that you actually understand them and don't. And spiritual bypassing means adopting these like profound sounding ideas and attitudes and statements, and you end up bypassing real spiritual growth. And real spiritual growth requires that you actually deal with the messiness and the ugliness of what's deep down. And I will leave it there. Once I start sort of making sort of a systematic series, I'll try to make them a lot shorter and concise, so they're actually watchable. Right now I'm okay making this long because I haven't been. It's been a long time since I've made YouTube videos, and I need to really get all this stuff out there, really get these. I'm processing things right now. This is not systematized. This is just me processing as I go. And writing is not good for me a lot of the times because it involves just too much analytical thinking about getting the words right, and it doesn't involve emotions as much as talking does. And when I just so this is all for posterity. This is just so I have my camera on when I'm talking about these ideas. And it also involves making videos. Also involves like aesthetics, like beauty, employing my acting skills, just with the way I talk, expressing emotion, comedy, and the ideas just flow better than when writing. Man, like I love writing for a bit, but when I write for a couple hours, I just feel like, man, I just wasted too much time. I went way too deep into stuff that I should have spent, playing music or drawing. But I'm an intellectual. I'm an academic. I don't think it technically. I'm an intellectual, and I think, and I have, the past few years realized that I need to sort of prioritize activities that build the heart and get in touch with emotions and my intellectual side, my logical side, my education. It's way up there already. I don't need to keep trying to you know, intellectualize things. I got to have some balance. So that's what I'm doing now. And the great thing about making YouTube videos is it enables me to engage my academic mind, but sort of incorporate my left brain more. It also feels good because it makes me feel like I'm having a conversation, so I'm less lonely. Because I don't have really much of a social life or anything. So anyway, I will leave it there. And I'm already at 46 minutes here. I think next time, not just with the spirituality topics aside, I'm gonna start getting into a habit of just. I have a hard time finding middle ground. I'll either make something an hour long, or I have to cut it off after a minute. So I'll just start. Maybe I'll make 10-second videos where I just make observations and I write. Okay, so writing. I'm a great writer, but because I'm a writer, making Facebook posts paralyzes me because I just want to keep going and perfect it. And once I start trying to perfect it and rewrite it, and then I start seeing more aspects of it that I want to get into, it turns into an essay, and I just get stressed out. So if I'm trying to write a post and I'm sitting there for more than 5 minutes, I just have to say, stop, done, no more. And with just making videos, I can't go back, and sometimes I stumble over my words at the beginning. I'm like, oh shit, and then I press pause, redo it. But I'm getting better at that. So anyway, that includes making my guitar songs. So yeah, perfectionism. I'm on the path, man. Good things are about to start. New beginnings. I think I'm on the edge of the doorway to freedom.